Good evening, everyone. I am Kent Wilfred Ilardo. For us who were not given a topic, we were tasked to choose a topic of our choice, which is relevant to the course title, which is Language Acquisition Development. And I came across this YouTube video wherein they held an event called Cambridge Day 2020, wherein they invited several renowned resource speakers to discuss on different topics, and one of which is the discussion of different language teaching methods. And the resource speaker here is Scott Thornberry. So let's have an introduction of him first.
And time for our first speaker. He was born in a country that is well known for its amazing landscape, New Zealand. He now lives in Spain. He is the author of several award-winning books for teachers on language and methodology. Please welcome Scott Thornberry. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Renata. Hi, everybody.
So that is Scott Thornberry. Let's jump right into his discussion proper. His discussion will be based on his book titled 30 Language Teaching Methods. He published this book, and so he's going to pick 7 out of 30. His 7 favorites language teaching methods.
One, of course, that I wrote a couple of years ago. And it's from this book that I want to share 7 of my methods that I investigated that I find rather interesting for all sorts of different reasons. So let's have a look at these 7 favorite methods.
First language teaching method that he talks about is Prendergast's mastery system. So it was developed by Prendergast, and let us hear what he has to say about him.
He was a civil servant in India in the 19th century. He learned some local languages like Hindustani, and from that experience of being a student, he developed a kind of method, and it was called the mastery system, and he wrote it up, and it was published, and it became very popular in its time.
Okay, so Prendergast developed his own method of acquiring a language. So here is a quote from Prendergast, and he said, "The power of speaking other tongues idiomatically is attained principally by efforts of the memory, not by logical reasoning." So this is his philosophy behind his language teaching technique, that a teacher or a learner must not dwell on the logical reasonings, on grammar, on the grammatical structures of the language, but rather in the implicit knowledge wherein students learn idiomatically. So let us hear more about this.
He had a very well-developed philosophy about learning how to learn a language. And he was committed to the idea that you don't learn a language by learning its grammar. You learn it by being immersed in its kind of patterns.
Okay, so that's it. Sabi daw ni Prendergast is we don't learn the language through its grammar, but through immersion in the different communicative contexts.
So he said the power of speaking other tongues idiomatically is attained principally by efforts of the memory, not by logical reasonings. That is to say, not by sitting down and learning all the grammar rules necessary. It's all about memory. And so how did he do it? Well,
okay, so when he said the memory of the most common words in a language. You simply memorize the most common words, okay? Not the grammatical structure, grammatical rules. That is the philosophy of Prendergast in teaching a language. here he gives an example wherein he discusses the words that translations of words that can be found in an application, an app which is called Duolingo. Let's hear more of it.
Duolingo, you'll know that this is basically how they teach languages. It's all about playing around with different combinations of words that fit into a syntax. So these are taken from different languages. This is Gaelic. The musician played the fiddle, but he died. It's not great, not a very authentic sentence, but who cares? Good morning, spider. Goodbye, fly. Practicing German. Or it does be snowing in the month of January. I'm not sure about that being correct. They say it's correct. But anyway, the eggplant is not a purple banana. Useful sentence? Probably not. But it's a way of manipulating all the different elements of the sentence.
Okay, so that's an example of the approach of Prendergast, wherein he suggests that memory of the most common words in language is enough. Okay, so in this application Duolingo, a person can play with those words and memorize the meaning of those corresponding words. For example, this sentence, an eggplant is not a purple banana. One student can memorize that the word "an" is equal to this word, which is I think is German, I think, and eggplant, aubergine, "n" equals to is, "est" equals to not. Okay, so that's how language acquisition works according to this method of Prendergast. Another person which is quite famous, I think, John Sinclair from the University of Birmingham, supports this idea of Prendergast. Let's hear more of it.
100 years before Professor John Sinclair at the University of Birmingham to say the same thing, in a sense. Learners would do well to learn the common words of the language very thoroughly because they carry the main patterns of the language, the common words of the language. You get, does this ring a bell? So, again, Prendergast was in some ways ahead of his time.
Okay, so that's it. Let's now go to the next method of language teaching. So the next method is the oral method. Let's hear more of it.
As he's associated with the book called The Oral Method, and this man is Harold Palmer. And if you don't know about Harold Palmer, you should. He's the kind of ancestor of language teaching and applied linguistics. He wrote lots of books like this one, as well as grammars and methodology books, etc. And basically, he was trained in the direct method, the Berlitz kind of method. He taught at a Berlitz school in his youth, and he kind of developed this method. And it was very much based on sentence patterns again, pre-audiolingualism.
Okay, so the focus of the oral method by Palmer is the emphasis on the most common sentence pattern. Okay, so he let the students recite these sentences orally. Okay, so repeat these sentences, and even if these sentences do not make a lot of sense, it doesn't have a very good context. Okay, so he still gives these sentences because it possesses the very basic sentence pattern. For example, is this my head? Okay, this pattern, is this my blank, is replace that. You can replace that with different nouns. Okay, so this is the very common possessive question. Okay, the common structure of possessive question. So he lets the students repeat this sentence, even if it does not make a lot of sense. Can you think of a communicative context wherein you say, "Is this my head?" Di ba parang makore kaya naputulan kay Olo? Diba? So even if these sentences don't make a lot of sense, he gives these sentences, by the way, anyway, to students, because this is the most common sentence structure in asking a possessive question. Is this my blank? Okay, and we have another one here. He replaced my with your. So he trains the students substituting different parts of the sentence. Palmer, when asked this question, what is the most fundamental guiding principle to conversational proficiency, he said this. Okay, so students maybe, or some people are asking him, what is the fundamental guiding principle to fluency of a language? He said this.
Now, what do you think it is? I hope this works, because hopefully you're sitting on the edge of your seats. What is the most fundamental guiding principle to fluency, let's say? It is this. It is memorize perfectly the largest number of common and useful word groups. Memorize. It's a memory. Language learning is all about memory. Sorry, but, you're going to have to remember a lot of stuff, and perfectly. You've got to get them right. And a large number of common, that is to say frequent and useful word, not words, not individual words, but word groups, what we will now call chunks. Yeah? So this is 1925.
Okay, so unlike Prendergast, Prendergast says that you should memorize the most common words, but Palmer here says that we should memorize the most common word groups. Okay, he's not just talking about different individual words, but word groups that are common and are useful and are used in everyday communication setting or context. So that is the position of Harold Palmer in his oral method. So what are these very common group of words that should be memorized, especially in English, specifically in English? So these words may be composed of idiomatic expressions or common expressions. Let's say fair and square, by the way, of course. Okay, so get busy. You don't say have busy. Okay, I mean, these are the most common words that are likely not to change and still stay the same throughout the years and years of using the language. You don't say square and fair, you say fair and square. You don't say by the path, you say by the way. Okay, let's hear more of it.
You've got to get it right. It's not square and fair, it's fair and square. Now, this is the thing, you can't get these things wrong. Memorized perfectly. There you go. So these are the ones that Penny gave you yesterday, just if you weren't here. But this is a very good examples of very common word groups. Okay, the reading method. Ooh, we better move.
So the reading method, I mean, in the 1930s, late 1930s, a study was conducted in the United States, a study on modern language teaching in different schools. Okay, so they wanted to track the progress of the students who are trying to learn foreign languages like French, German, or Spanish, or Portuguese, and they found depressing results. Okay, so in 2 years' time, students made little progress. So this man, Algernon Coleman, stepped into the scene and proposed an idea. Let's hear more of it.
And so they did a big report, and this guy called Coleman concluded that it was a waste of time trying to get these students to be able to speak fluently in the time that was available. And he said, let's just get realistic. Let's lower the bar and say it's impossible to achieve native like fluency in 2 years at 1 or 2 hours a week, but you could learn to read in the language, and reading may be a step in the right direction. So that's why it's called the reading method.
So Coleman proposed a method which is simple reading method. Okay, starting it simple reading method. And this is how I put it. The ultimate objective DAO for any curriculum of language teaching institution is this: the ability to read the foreign language with moderate ease and with enjoyment for recreative and vocational purposes. He put an emphasis or importance in reading. And so this idea of Coleman was adopted by Michael West, and he wrote a book about reading. And let's find out what he says about reading.
In a foreign language, and he concluded in 1937, learning to read a language before learning to speak has the advantage that when the pupil begins to speak, he or she possesses some general idea of the form of the language and some sense of right or wrong idiom. In other words, the experience of reading gives you a sense of the language, of what is idiomatic, etc. You're well prepared from reading. I might add reading and listening too. Those days, of course, listening in the class was less easily implemented.
Okay, so sabi daw ni Michael West is reading gives the pupils the general idea of the form of the language. When you say form, it may include vocabulary, sentence formation, syntax. So that's it. I cannot discuss to you the following 4 more methods of language teaching, because in here Professor Scott Thornberry discusses 7, so I don't have much time. So I'll just leave you with these 3 methods: the Prendergast mastery method, oral method, and reading method. Okay, thank you everyone.